So I think my presentation is going to be a little bit different, maybe a little bit more on the practical side of things as I thought about how to put this together. So, so thanks to Andrew and Bridget again for the invitation to come share some of my experience, my observations with you, and hopefully you'll get something out of it. There are lots of ways to do what I'm going to share with the way I do it. So hopefully you can translate it into your experiences. And it's kind of, I guess, oriented towards new faculty, so keep that in mind. So we've already been through backgrounds and introductions, but I do want to point out, so I'm an assistant professor in the School of Polymers. Like my colleagues, just submitted my tenure package, which means, number one, I can breathe again, right? So, and not necessarily relax, but breathe. And so bring some balance back to my professional life. So with that done, I also teach 3 courses on average per year, and so you'll get an idea of where my perspective comes from, and balance that with a research group, which is about 10 people right now. So a lot of my reflection is derived from some of these experiences, right? So I thought I'd share some of my observations, and so in terms of survival skills, one of the things that I immediately came to mind is multitasking, right? And so in my experience, this is multitasking redefined. And so if you go, when you get to the point where you're submitting your tenure package and you think back, you're going to hopefully have the same experience, right? And so how do you learn how to be not only just a teacher, but a mentor, an advisor, a counselor, a researcher, proposer, author, editor, lab manager, reviewer, and the list goes on. And there's some things that roles that come up that I don't even know how to define at some point. And these all come about from interactions in the classroom and interactions with students in the lab. So this is kind of where my perspective and observations come from for today's presentation. So and if you think about these roles that you are asked to fulfill, and you don't even know you're going to have to fulfill them, right? You get tugged in so many different ways. You have to learn how to do these things in concertation in terms of doing many things at one time, right? So these are the source of fulfillment, but also the source of challenges at the same time. And so this is where my topic came in, right? So one of the main things that has helped me be successful as an assistant professor is learning how to manage time effectively. This is something I wasn't necessarily good at when I got here, but I'd like to think I'm fairly decent at it now. And and I'll share the way that I do it. And then being a teaching forum, I thought I would leave you with one way to engage students in the classroom, right? So one way to think about this, and you can go to the bookstore, you can go to online and find many different strategies for time management. This is my way to do it. This is a simple way to start, right? And so you can define every activity you do in your professional life, in your personal life, if you choose to categorize these things in that manner, and one of 2 ways, right? So each item or task, habit is either urgent or not urgent, right? And it's either important or not important, right? So as a society, we tend to, at least today, we tend to focus on things that are urgent, but not necessarily important in many cases. And this is kind of the iPhone society, right? The iPhone dings, you immediately go, stop what you're doing, you immediately go check your email, right? So this is kind of that urgent society where it may or may not be important. So where do you begin with time management? And this is kind of where I started. An important question to ask is this question: so am I doing this blank, right? This task, this habit, because it's truly important, or am I doing it just because it's urgent? And so if you can answer this question in the tasks that you do, in the things that you do throughout the workday, you can begin to categorize these things as urgent, important, not urgent, not important. Right, and so this goes into the way you develop the time management plan, right? So another way to think about this in terms of numbers, there's 168 hours in a week, and even assistant professors have to sleep it sometimes. So if you get a wrap around time management, your life becomes much less hectic as you begin your career as a professor, right? So this is the way I do it, and this is a concept that was popularized by Stephen Covey's book. The name of the book is 7 Habits to Highly Efficient or Highly Effective People. And so he defines different categories, different quadrants in terms of things being either urgent or not urgent, important or not important, right? And so the first slide plays into this, right? So quadrant 1 is your urgent and important items, and this tends to be your crisis quadrant. These are things like health and family emergencies for one type of crisis, but also things like deadline-driven projects. And these are things that you're going to have to deal with. They're going to happen, and you have to deal with them in a time-effective manner, right? So you want to spend about 20% of your professional life in this quadrant, right? And this is just by necessity of things that we have to do as a part of the job description, right? So the other easy one to define is quadrant 4. These are your not urgent, not important items. You could call them time wasters or escapes, right? So things like socializing, trivial busy work, most emails, most phone calls that you would get, daydreaming. Those things are very easy to define, so you can categorize those very easily. The other two quadrants are quadrant 2 and 3. Quadrant 2 is where you want to spend about 80% of your professional life, right? So this is your important but not urgent items, otherwise known as the productivity quadrant. This is going to be preparation and planning, prevention mode to keep you out of the crisis mode in terms of professional development, relationship building, personal and capability development. So if you spend 80% here, you spend less time here and less time here, right? So it's all a balance of how you set up your and define your objectives and goals. And then the third quadrant here is urgent but not important, and I've already mentioned this one. This is kind of the iPhone society where it's deceptive, right? So you think it's important, you think it is urgent, but it's not important, right? So things, phone calls, interruptions, walk-ins. And this, as a professor, if you teach, right, you're going to have to deal with walk-ins one way or the other. So learning how to deal with those always urgent things from a student perspective in a time-effective manner becomes an important issue. Not that they're not important, but in many cases you get 20 of the same questions back to back to back to back, and how do you deal with that in a time-effective manner, right? So I won't spend much time here, but if you were to put some metrics on each of the quadrants as a result, right? So crisis quadrant, you're going to get stressed, you're going to burn out, you're going to constantly be in crisis management and firefighting mode. Quadrant 2, you tend to get vision, perspective, balance, discipline, control. Quadrant 3, deception, short-term focus. You begin to see goals and plans as worthless because you never meet them, right? Feel victimized, always out of control. And then quadrant 4, in the extreme case, time wasters, job loss, right? So dependency on other things to other people to get things done. Right, so once you go through your task and categorize according to those quadrants, you can begin to develop a time management plan. And the specific one that I use is the 18-minute plan. Again, there are many different ways to do this. Again, this is based on a book that I read, Peter Bregman's book, 18 Minutes, Find Your Focus, Master Distraction, and Get the Right Things Done, right? So it's called the 18-minute plan. And so this begins with morning minutes. So I spend 5 minutes each morning before I do anything else, before I turn the computer on. I sit down and make a to-do list. And this is actually something I learned from one of my graduate students, who I think was the most organized person I've ever met in my life. So a lot of this came out of interactions with that graduate student. But so you decide what you want to do that day, what's going to make the day most highly effective, right? And so key questions to ask to develop these to-do lists: what can I realistically accomplish today? So you don't want to oversell what you can do in a single day, and what will leave me feeling productive and successful at the end of the day. And so there's some degree of success just in being able to check things off a to-do list if you get into the habit of doing it. So once you have your to-do list, you then move everything on your to-do list into a calendar. Nice thing about USM, we use Microsoft Exchange, so you can do that and have it on your computer, have it on your iPhone all at once, and it all updates simultaneously. So it's a good way to track this. I use the 3-day rule. Anything that's been on my to-do list for 3 days gets a slot on my calendar. Otherwise, it gets removed from the to-do list, right? So a way to prioritize some of your to-do list. If it's not important to be on there more than 3 days, then it shouldn't be on there in the first place, right? So a good way to prioritize some of these tasks. Step 2 is refocus. So 1 minute of every hour set a watch, set your calendar to ding on the start of every hour, and then go back and ask 2 questions at each hour. Am I doing what I most need to do right now? So it helps you refocus on your to-do list. And will this activity enable me to reach today's goals or this week's goals, depending on how far you plan out, right? And then in the evening, you kind of recap everything. So you spend 5 minutes to review how your day went. And there are lots of questions you could ask. How did my day go? What success did I experience? What challenges did I endure? What did I learn today about myself, about others? And then what would I do the same today or differently tomorrow, right? So, and then the last one is where I address things. And the last bullet there is updating people, thanking people, asking any questions I need to ask, sharing feedback with students, and this is the time that I do that to wrap up the day. So this is the way I use time management, and within 8 to 10 minutes, you can't really spend a lot of time delving into the details of this, but hopefully you get some sense of some good ways to go about this. And so if you can wrap your head around time management and get good at those tasks, then you can have time to do other things and maintain some balance in your career, right? So I wanted to leave you with one example, since it is a teaching forum and not a time management forum, with one thing that I've used in the past and continue to use, and actually developed it as part of the QEP fellowship program here at USM, Quality Enhancement Program for improving oral and written communication in the classroom. And so this is a lecture summary activity, and so basically what I ask students to do, I assign lecture summaries prior to the start of the next lecture, and so they're asked to summarize the previous lecture in their own words as an oral presentation, either PowerPoint at the board, depending on what the details are. And so I ask them to reintroduce the topic, reiterate the main points of the lecture, of the previous lecture, using any equations or derivations that are necessary. I won't go through the details of how I grade it, but if you're interested, we can go through that during discussion. This was developed for a graduate level course, and so it works very well. I developed it for polymer kinetics, and so you can think mathematical derivations based on or just to describe chemical reactions. And so I use it to engage students, to get them out of the monotony of having to go through derivations of kinetic equations. And it gives us a chance to engage students in multiple ways, right? So it gives them, number one, a chance to go back and critically review your lecture material, put it in their own words, and then practice those oral presentation skills, which is an important thing to do particularly as a scientist, right? So express your details in your own words. And the thing I like about it the most is the peer-to-peer explanation, right? So you always hear that if you can teach it, you truly understand it, right? And so you get this kind of interaction, allowing the students to explain in their own words back to their peers, using their own descriptions of the material. And so we have pretty small classes in polymer science, 15 to 20 in terms of a graduate level class, but it could be adaptable in multiple ways to larger classes, and we can talk about some of the ways that you might do that if you're interested. So with that, I'll leave you with some resources, and if you're interested, I can send you some of these. These are some of the books that I've read based on time management and leadership. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.